When you think of Robin Williams, you think of laughter that could light up a room, a voice that could become 1,000 characters in a heartbeat, and eyes that twinkled like they were hiding a wonderful secret. But behind that sparkle lived a soul that often wrestled with silence. A silence he filled with the sound of everyone else's laughter. Robin Williams wasn't just funny, he was transcendent. He had the rare gift of turning chaos into comedy, pain into performance, and heartbreak into healing. Yet, for all the joy he gave the world, there was one thing he couldn't quite give himself: peace. Robin McLaurin Williams was born on July 21, 1951, in Chicago, Illinois. He was the only child of a Ford Motor Company executive, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, and his mother, Lori McLaurin, a former model with a warm heart and quick wit. On the surface, he had everything: comfort, privilege, and a beautiful home. But even as a child, Robin's world felt strangely quiet. His father was often away for work, and his mother, though loving, was also a social butterfly who moved through life with grace and independence. So, Robin spent most of his time alone in the attic, surrounded by his toy soldiers, inventing voices, creating worlds, and making imaginary friends. It was there, in the silence of that large, empty home, that Robin Williams began to build his own universe, one made of laughter. He once said that comedy was his way of survival, that making people laugh was how he felt connected, how he felt seen, and that connection would become the heartbeat of his entire life. But before he became the man the world adored, Robin was a quiet, shy boy who struggled to fit in. When the family moved to Detroit, and later to Marin County, California, Robin's world began to change. The laughter he used as a shield started becoming his language. At school, he was the class clown, not because he wanted attention, but because he didn't want anyone else to feel alone like he once did. Robin attended a private high school where, despite his humor, he was still the quiet kid in the back row. Brilliant, imaginative, but unsure of where he belonged. He was also incredibly intelligent, excelling in academics and sports, but his real love was the stage. When he joined the drama club, something inside him came alive. For the first time, he wasn't pretending to be someone, he was someone. Acting gave him permission to feel, to express, to be seen. It was through performance that Robin discovered his true superpower: empathy. He could step into anyone's shoes, feel their pain, and make their story come alive. That gift would later make him not just a comedian, but a legend. After high school, Robin attended Claremont Men's College to study political science, but his heart wasn't in it. The stage was calling. He dropped out and enrolled at the College of Marin, where he studied theater and began to hone his craft. His teachers quickly realized they were witnessing something rare: a student who could improvise endlessly, turning a simple line into an entire world. His energy was electric, his imagination boundless. Every rehearsal became a performance, every scene a chance to fly. That natural magic earned him a scholarship to the prestigious Juilliard School in New York City, one of the best acting schools in the world. At Juilliard, Robin studied under the legendary John Houseman and alongside another rising talent, Christopher Reeve. Yes, that Christopher Reeve, the man who would later become Superman. The two formed an instant bond, a brotherhood built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Robin's comedic instincts were unstoppable, and even at Juilliard, where discipline was everything, his teachers marveled at his spontaneity. He could take a single cue and turn it into a symphony of laughter. But underneath that brilliance, there was always restlessness, a flicker of sadness that came and went like a shadow. Even as he made everyone else laugh, you could sense that Robin's humor came from somewhere deeper, somewhere that hurt. After Juilliard, Robin began performing stand-up comedy in small clubs around San Francisco and Los Angeles. It was the 1970s, a golden era for American comedy, and Robin fit right in. Though no one had ever seen anything quite like him, he didn't tell jokes, he became them. His performances were like fireworks, fast, colorful, unpredictable. He'd switch accents, improvise entire dialogues, jump from politics to philosophy to absurdity without missing a beat. The audience was spellbound. They didn't just laugh, they marveled. Watching Robin Williams was like witnessing a storm of genius you couldn't contain. And soon, the world noticed. His big break came when he was cast as Mork, an alien from the planet Ork, in the hit TV show Mork and Mindy. What started as a small guest role on Happy Days exploded into one of television's biggest sensations. Mork wasn't just funny, he was innocent, curious, and full of wonder. He saw humanity the way Robin did, as something beautiful, messy, and worth laughing about. The show was an instant hit, and overnight, Robin Williams became a household name. Audiences couldn't get enough of his wild energy, his quick wit, and his infectious warmth. America had found its newest comedy star, but what they didn't see was the exhaustion behind that brilliance. The fame came fast, and with it, the pressure to always be on. Robin was no longer just a performer, he was a symbol of joy. Everywhere he went, people expected laughter. They wanted the alien, the madman, the comedian, but rarely did anyone ask how the man beneath the jokes was doing. The applause was deafening, but when it faded, he was left alone with his thoughts. He once said that the saddest people often do their best to make others happy, because they know what it feels like to be invisible. For Robin, that was more than a quote, it was truth. In those years, the comedy scene was wild. Fame came with temptations, late nights, constant travel, and the darker side of Hollywood's glamour. Robin's success opened doors to endless opportunities, but also to endless chaos. The laughter became both his escape and his prison. He wanted to keep everyone smiling, but the more he gave, the less of himself he seemed to have left. It was during this time that his personal life began to shift too. He married Valerie Velarde in 1978, and they had a son, Zachary. Fatherhood brought him joy, a real, grounding joy, but balancing fame and family was hard. His schedule was relentless, and his mind never stopped racing. When he wasn't performing, he was preparing, thinking, worrying, and deep down, he was searching for something that fame couldn't give: stillness. Then came Hollywood. Robin transitioned from television to film with ease. His first major movie role was in Popeye 1980, and though it didn't meet expectations, it showed his ability to bring larger-than-life characters to the screen. But it was Good Morning, Vietnam in 1987 that made him a movie star. Playing the irreverent radio DJ Adrian Cronauer, Robin combined comedy and compassion in a way no one else could. He wasn't just making jokes, he was speaking truth through laughter. The film earned him an Academy Award nomination and proved that he wasn't just a clown, he was an artist. By now, Robin Williams was everywhere, from Dead Poets Society to Mrs. Doubtfire, from Aladdin to Good Will Hunting. Each performance was a reflection of a man who understood the beauty and pain of being human. When he voiced Genie in Aladdin, kids laughed, but adults heard something deeper. His humor was rapid fire, but behind every line was a heart that cared deeply about connection. And when he told his students in Dead Poets Society to seize the day, you could feel it. He wasn't acting, he believed it. But success, no matter how bright, couldn't quiet the darkness inside him. The world saw a man who had everything: fame, family, awards, yet Robin often felt empty. His mind was a constant storm of thoughts, ideas, and emotions. Laughter was his medicine, but it was temporary. There were nights when he couldn't sleep, mornings when he didn't want to wake up, moments when the crowd's roar felt like an echo in a hollow room. His battle was invisible, and like many who bring light to others, he kept his pain hidden behind a smile. Still, he pushed on, because to Robin, making others laugh wasn't just a job, it was a calling. He once said, "I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up all alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone." That insight didn't come from fame, it came from experience. He understood loneliness in a way few could, and through his art, he tried to make sure no one else ever felt that way. By the 1990s, Robin Williams had become one of the most beloved figures in entertainment. But behind the awards, the red carpets, and the standing ovations, the same boy who once hid in an attic with his toy soldiers still lived inside him, searching for comfort in a noisy world. The laughter that had once saved him was now the thing he felt trapped by. People loved Robin for his energy, but few saw the exhaustion in his eyes after the laughter stopped. As the years went on, Robin's performances became more soulful, more human. He played roles that revealed the quiet sadness he carried. Films like The Fisher King, Patch Adams, and What Dreams May Come. In each, he blurred the line between comedy and heartbreak, showing audiences that laughter and tears often come from the same place. And perhaps that's why we loved him so deeply. Because through Robin Williams, we saw ourselves, the laughter we show the world, and the pain we keep hidden inside. By the early 1990s, Robin Williams had become more than an entertainer. He was an emotion. When he walked into a room, laughter followed, like light chasing away shadows. His performances were unpredictable, spontaneous, full of life. He could make anyone feel alive. Yet, the truth was, Robin himself often felt numb. The very gift that made him special also drained him. His comedy was a reflection of his empathy. He felt everything too deeply. Every laugh he created came from a place that had once known tears. He wasn't just acting when he played broken, hopeful, or lonely characters. He was revealing pieces of himself. The pressure to always be Robin Williams, the energetic genius, the improviser, the comic storm, was immense. People didn't just love his performances, they depended on them. He became the world's medicine for sadness. The man who could heal hearts with laughter. But even laughter, when it becomes an expectation, can turn heavy. Fame brought adoration, but it also brought walls. People approached him not as Robin, but as the idea of him, the clown, the genie, the miracle worker. And so, the man behind the masks began to fade into the background. In interviews, Robin was magnetic, quick, charming, unpredictable. He could switch from Shakespeare to cartoon voices in seconds. The world adored it. But if you looked closely, those rare moments between jokes, you could see a flicker of something else, a quiet, unguarded sadness, a longing that couldn't quite be disguised. He used humor the way some people use armor to protect himself from the pain of being vulnerable. He once admitted that making others laugh was his way of coping with his own darkness. "If I can make people laugh," he said, "maybe they won't see how sad I am." As his fame grew, so did his inner turmoil. Hollywood, for all its glamour, can be a lonely place. There's applause, yes, but it fades. There are crowds, but they move on. Robin struggled to find stability in a world that demanded constant reinvention. His first marriage to Valerie Velarde had already begun to crumble under the weight of fame, long working hours, and emotional distance. They eventually divorced, though they remained respectful and caring toward each other. Robin's life was a whirlwind, one project after another, one performance after another. He was always running, perhaps because slowing down meant facing what he didn't want to feel. In 1989, Robin married Marcia Garces, who had been his son's nanny. Together, they had 2 children, Zelda and Co. Marcia brought warmth and balance to his life. She was gentle, patient, and understanding. Their home was filled with laughter, art, and love. Robin adored being a father. Around his children, he wasn't a star. He was simply dad, silly, tender, and deeply caring. He would perform impromptu puppet shows, tell bedtime stories with outrageous voices, and make breakfast into a comedy routine. For those who knew him privately, these were his happiest moments, the times when he could just be himself, without the need for applause. Yet, even surrounded by love, Robin's battles didn't disappear. Like many who live to make others happy, he struggled to keep himself whole. His mind was a constant rush of thoughts, creative, chaotic, restless. He had spoken openly about the loneliness that sometimes came after performing, the silence after the laughter. "You go home, and there's no applause," he once said. "Just quiet." That quiet could be beautiful, but it could also be unbearable. And in that silence, old habits returned, the desire to escape, to numb, to fill the emptiness with something else. In the late 80s and early 90s, Robin began confronting his struggles with addiction, something that had shadowed parts of his early fame. He had managed to stay sober for many years, finding solace in family and work. But pain has a way of returning when life slows down. After the death of his close friend, John Belushi, in the early 80s, Robin had sworn off the substances that had haunted so many in their generation. But as the pressures of life grew, the old temptations whispered again. It wasn't about indulgence, it was about escape. Escape from the pressure, from the expectations, from himself. Still, even amidst those struggles, his creativity soared. The 1990s were perhaps Robin's greatest artistic decade. Films like Dead Poets Society, Hook, Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, Good Will Hunting, and Patch Adams became timeless classics, each one revealing a different layer of his soul. In Good Will Hunting, when he said, "You're not perfect, sport, and let me save you the suspense, neither is she, but the question is, whether or not you're perfect for each other," it didn't sound like a line from a script, it sounded like a truth he had lived. That role earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and the standing ovation he received that night was one of the most emotional moments in Oscar history. But even then, as he held that golden statue, there was a hint of humility, almost disbelief in his eyes. He smiled, but his smile seemed to say, "I hope this means I did something right." Robin never sought fame for the sake of fame. What he wanted was connection. That magical thread between performer and audience, between laughter and healing. He used his platform to give back, quietly visiting hospitals, performing for children, and supporting countless charities. He was especially devoted to helping U.S. troops overseas, performing for them through the USO and bringing laughter to some of the darkest corners of the world. To those soldiers, he wasn't just a comedian, he was hope. But even hope can get heavy. By the early 2000s, Robin's career entered a quieter phase. He continued to make films, some serious, some lighthearted, but Hollywood was changing. New comedians were emerging, and the industry's obsession with youth and profit left little room for the kind of soulful comedy Robin was known for. Yet he kept going, trying new things, taking risks. He returned to stand-up comedy, reconnecting with his roots, touring across the country to packed theaters. On stage, he was still unstoppable, wild, sharp, full of life. But when the curtain fell, the old silence returned. At home, things were changing too. His marriage to Marcia began to falter. Years of distance, emotional strain, and personal battles took their toll. The couple divorced in 2010 after over 19 years together. Robin was devastated. He loved Marcia deeply and adored his children. But sometimes love isn't enough to save a heart that feels lost. He found himself, once again, searching for stability, for something that felt like home. He later married Susan Schneider, a graphic designer who brought calm into his storm. They shared a quiet bond, two creative souls, drawn together by understanding and care. Susan often described Robin as a man of immense kindness, someone who went out of his way to make others feel seen. He would chat with strangers as if they were old friends, tip generously, remember people's names, and offer small acts of goodness wherever he went. That was Robin, never too big to be kind, never too famous to be human. But inside, his health began to decline. What many didn't know was that Robin was battling more than sadness. He was also facing physical illness. In his later years, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a condition that affects movement, mood, and cognition. But at the time, the diagnosis wasn't entirely accurate. Doctors would later discover that he was actually suffering from something much rarer and more devastating: Lewy body dementia, a neurological disorder that causes severe depression, anxiety, paranoia, and cognitive decline. Robin didn't know the full truth. He only knew that something was terribly wrong. His once quick mind, the instrument of his genius, began to falter. His energy, his confidence, his joy all began to fade. For a man whose identity was built on sharp wit and imagination, that was terrifying. Still, he fought. He continued to work, starring in movies like Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, and The Angriest Man in Brooklyn. But behind the scenes, he was struggling more than ever. The man who had made the world laugh for decades now found it hard to even smile. His mind, once an endless fountain of ideas, began to turn against him. He felt confusion, fear, and frustration. But even in those dark days, he never lost his tenderness. Those close to him said he still cracked jokes, still said, "I love you" freely, still cared about everyone else's happiness more than his own. Robin's illness was cruel. It dimmed his spark, but never erased it. He was a man fighting to hold on to himself. Even as pieces slipped away, he would apologize to his loved ones for things beyond his control, feeling guilty for being sick, as though he were letting them down. That was who he was, always thinking of others, even when he was breaking inside. His wife, Susan, would later say that Robin was the bravest man I've ever known, because he faced unimaginable fear with love, grace, and humor. And yet, as his mind grew foggy, the world remained unaware of how much pain he was truly in. To the public, he was still Robin Williams, the man who made us laugh in Mrs. Doubtfire, made us cry in Good Will Hunting, and made us believe in magic in Aladdin. But behind closed doors, the man who once filled the world with joy was slowly losing the ability to feel it himself. The hardest part of his illness wasn't physical, it was emotional. Robin could sense himself slipping away, and for someone whose whole life had been about connection and clarity, that was unbearable. Even so, he never stopped being kind. He would still send gifts, still check in on old friends, still smile at strangers. In those final months, even as he faced confusion and fear, his love never faded. That was the paradox of Robin Williams. Even when his own world was falling apart, he made sure everyone else's world stayed a little brighter. As part 2 draws to a close, we see Robin at a crossroads, a man who gave everything to make others happy, now trapped in a body and mind that no longer obeyed him. He was surrounded by love, yet haunted by a growing sense of isolation. The laughter he had once used to heal the world could no longer heal himself. The stage lights were dimming, the applause fading, and the quiet, that same quiet he had known as a lonely boy in his attic, had returned. Only this time, it was heavier. But before that silence became permanent, Robin Williams left the world something extraordinary. Not just his films or his jokes, but a lesson that joy and pain can coexist, that kindness matters, that laughter, even in its lightness, can come from the deepest parts of the soul. He had been our laughter when we needed it most, and though he couldn't always find it for himself, he gave enough of it to last generations. By 2013, Robin Williams was still everywhere, on screens, on stages, in hearts. He had spent nearly 4 decades as one of the most beloved entertainers in the world. From the outside, it seemed like the story of a man who had done it all, but inside, his world had grown smaller, quieter, more uncertain. The man who once conquered silence with laughter was now learning to live within it again, and this time, it frightened him. When his diagnosis came, initially thought to be Parkinson's, Robin tried to face it with courage. He still smiled, still joked with his doctors, still thanked the nurses. He told his wife Susan, "We'll get through this." But deep down, something inside him knew this battle was different. He began to feel his memory slipping, his movements slowing, his once razor-sharp mind clouding. The quicksilver wit that had once dazzled the world now stuttered and faltered. For someone whose genius had always been tied to his mind, that loss was unbearable. And yet, he didn't want anyone to worry. He kept much of his fear hidden. Friends recalled that even as he struggled, he'd crack jokes about it, trying to make light of his confusion. That was Robin, always deflecting pain with humor, always protecting others from his suffering. He couldn't bear to see people sad, not for him. Even in the darkest hours, his instinct was to make others feel lighter. But behind that brave face, his days had become battles with anxiety, insomnia, and the disorienting symptoms of the disease he didn't fully understand. Lewy body dementia, the illness that would later be discovered as the real cause, is one of the cruelest of neurological conditions. It can mimic Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, causing vivid dreams, memory loss, depression, and hallucinations. The mind that had once soared through imagination now turned on itself. And through it all, Robin kept fighting, trying to hold on to his light. He continued to work, determined to keep creating. On the set of Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, colleagues noticed he wasn't quite himself. He'd forget lines, stumble through takes, and appear uncharacteristically withdrawn. For the man who once improvised entire scenes without a script, it was heartbreaking, but no one doubted his effort. Robin gave everything he had until the very end. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted to make people laugh one more time. That's who he was. At home, he found solace in small things: painting, reading, feeding the deer that wandered through his yard. He'd sit quietly, sometimes lost in thought, sometimes smiling at simple moments. He still loved his children deeply, Zachary, Zelda, and Cody, and spoke of them with immense pride. They were his grounding force, his legacy beyond fame. Around them, he was soft-spoken and tender, the same father who had once turned breakfast into a comedy show. But even love, no matter how deep, can always silence the voice of despair. As his illness progressed, Robin became more aware that he was losing pieces of himself. He once told a close friend, "I just want to reboot my brain." It was said half in jest, half in heartbreak. He missed being himself. The man who could once bring entire rooms to life now struggled to find that spark. In his own reflection, in the summer of 2014, Robin's condition worsened. Sleep became harder, anxiety more intense, and confusion more frequent. His wife and family stayed by his side, offering love and patience, but inside, Robin was slipping away from the person he had always been. The laughter that once flowed effortlessly now felt distant, unreachable. He wasn't giving up, he was just lost in a storm no one could see. Then, one quiet morning in August 2014, the world changed forever. News broke that Robin Williams, the man who had made the entire planet laugh, had passed away. The world went still. For a moment, it was as if the light dimmed everywhere. People didn't want to believe it. It didn't make sense. How could someone who gave so much joy be gone so suddenly, so painfully? Social media flooded with disbelief, tears, memories, and gratitude. Across countries and generations, there was one shared feeling: heartbreak. But in that heartbreak, something else bloomed: love. From fans who had grown up with Mrs. Doubtfire and Aladdin, to soldiers who had seen him perform in war zones, to families who had found comfort in Good Will Hunting, the world came together to say thank you. Thank you for the laughter, for the kindness, for the compassion that radiated from everything he touched. Television anchors choked up reading the news. Fellow comedians cried on air. His close friends Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, Steve Martin were devastated. But in their grief, they all said the same thing. Robin Williams was not just funny, he was love in motion. He made people feel seen, understood, alive. He gave everything he had, until there was nothing left to give. His children, each in their own way, carried forward his spirit. Zelda Williams, in a beautiful tribute, wrote, "I love you. I miss you. I'll try to keep looking up." Those words echoed what Robin had always believed, that even in pain, you look up, not down. That laughter, even when born from sorrow, is still a form of hope. In the months after his passing, the truth about his illness emerged. The autopsy revealed that Robin had been suffering from diffuse Lewy body dementia, a condition that explained the confusion, paranoia, and depression he had endured. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't choice. It was a cruel disease that had stolen him from himself. For many, this revelation brought a measure of peace, understanding that the man who had lifted the world had been quietly battling something no one could see. His wife, Susan, later called it the most intense, terrifying, and heartbreaking journey of our lives. She became an advocate for awareness, determined to ensure that others would not suffer in silence. The world mourned not just a comedian, but a soul that had touched millions. Vigils were held in cities around the globe. In San Francisco, fans gathered at the Mrs. Doubtfire house, leaving flowers, letters, and thank you notes. The park bench from Good Will Hunting in Boston became a shrine, covered in quotes, candles, and messages of love. People wrote, "You taught us to seize the day. Thank you for the laughter," and "You were magic." And perhaps, in a way, he still was. Because Robin Williams never truly left. His laughter still echoes every time we watch his movies. His words still comfort us when we feel lost, and his kindness still inspires countless acts of goodness around the world. Teachers still show Dead Poets Society to remind students to think differently. Families still gather around Mrs. Doubtfire for comfort and joy. Children still giggle at the genie's wild energy in Aladdin. His work didn't just entertain, it healed. Even today, years later, the mere mention of his name brings warmth. There's something almost sacred about the way people remember him, not as a celebrity, but as a friend they never met. Robin's gift was that he made the world feel smaller, kinder. He reminded us that laughter could be both a shield and a salve. That even when life feels unbearable, there's beauty in a single smile. In a world that often celebrates perfection, Robin Williams showed us the beauty of imperfection, the courage to feel, the grace to cry, the strength to keep laughing through pain. He once said, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always." That quote, more than any punchline, may be his truest legacy. When the curtain finally fell on Robin's life, the applause didn't fade, it grew louder, echoing through time. Because the best kind of laughter doesn't end when the show does. It stays in the heart, long after the performer is gone. Today, when we watch his movies, it's impossible not to feel both joy and ache. We laugh, and yet behind that laughter, there's a tear, because we know what he gave, and what it must have cost him to give it. But maybe that's exactly what made him so extraordinary. Robin Williams turned his own battles into light for others. His pain became our laughter, his vulnerability became our comfort, his humanity became our mirror. In a way, Robin's story isn't one of tragedy, but of transcendence. He lived fiercely, lived deeply, and gave more of himself than most people ever could. And though his time was cut short, his legacy is eternal, not just in film, but in the hearts of everyone he touched. Because real magic isn't about escaping reality, it's about transforming it. And that's what Robin did, over and over again. Some people make you laugh, a few make you think, but only the rarest, like Robin Williams, make you feel. He showed us that it's okay to hurt, okay to be imperfect, okay to laugh through tears. His life was proof that even the brightest light can come from the darkest places. If Robin were here today, he'd probably brush off all the tributes with a joke. Maybe say, "Don't be sad. I'm just up here trying out new material." You can almost hear his voice, playful, kind, full of mischief and warmth. And maybe that's the best way to remember him, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the laughter he gave us, the lessons he left us, and the love he showed the world. Because Robin Williams may have been the funniest man alive, but more than that, he was the man who reminded us that behind every laugh, there's a heart that beats, a soul that feels, and a story that matters. And even now, somewhere beyond the noise, maybe he's still making angels laugh, the same way he made the whole world believe in joy, in kindness, in second chances. Robin once said, "You're only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it." And maybe that's the message he left us with. To hold on to that spark, to laugh, to love, to be kind, and to never stop believing in the magic of simply being human. Because though Robin Williams couldn't always find his own smile, he gave the world millions of them. And in that, his spirit lives on, not as a shadow, but as a light that never fades. The curtain has fallen, the stage is dark, but the laughter still echoes. And somewhere in that echo, the world still smiles, because of him.